In League with a UFO, copyright 1997 by Baldin. Out of print. Can you handle the truth? Do you really want to learn the truth about ETs? Would it be hard for you to discover that our intelligence level as a human being is nothing more than an animal would be to us, in comparison to most extraterrestrials visiting the planet? Have you thought to yourself, how could ETs possibly hide their existence from mankind for so long if they really do exist? Has the thought ever crossed your mind, how much further advanced could ETs really be? Though our human minds literally cannot yet grasp the concept of their true nature coming from a higher dimensional reality, as they can exist outside and inside our third dimension, at least we can have a small peek into what their world is like, at least from a third-dimensional human perspective. Thanks to the members Xtn'd and Space Visitor. I have been trying to put together my experiences for a very long time now and have struggled to even put down on paper everything and I have experienced with ETs and on board various spacecraft. Unlike many others, I have been allowed to remember some of my experiences and be fully conscious of all surrounding. The hardest part is describing and explaining the surroundings and the things I experienced, but thanks to Xtn'd and Space Visitor who sent me U2Us telling me some of my thoughts are similar to another poster's experiences, I just finished reading 2 documents written by this person about ETs and their ships and can tell you this is exactly the way ETs and their ships are. I couldn't have explained or put it down on paper any better than this person did. In this light, I have decided to direct you to these documents that describe to the best of anyone's ability what ETs are really like and what ET ships are really like. You won't find these descriptions anywhere else, and I have read many books on the subject out there for a long time now, but they have not come close to the detail and descriptions found in these documents or the truth seekers and those who are wondering how much further advanced ETs really can be. Well, this is your chance to actually get a rough draft idea. Before you read this, I will just say that this will all seem like a fairy tale to some because ET technology, if you could even really call it that, operates interdimensionally and is like a living organism that is alive to us in the third dimension. You really need to drop the illusion of this world and reality with a clean open mind in order to hear the truth, because it is that far out there and will sound undoubtedly unbelievable. Neil Armstrong wrote, "Those who can remove one of the truth's protective layers. There are places to go beyond belief. Our third-dimensional reality, or the world we live in, is a layer of the truth that Neil Armstrong speaks about. It is an illusion that if we could only remove part of, we truly could go to places beyond belief, as he so eloquently put it. If we could see past our physical human eye and access other realities, we could understand that all third-dimensional laws can in fact be broken. Remove the laws of physics, science, and the world, as there are no limitations, only illusions. Hard to believe? I'm right there with you. ETs have the capability of breaking all third-dimensional laws as we know them by changing matter and manipulating time and space from other dimensions. Can we fly like Superman? Never say never. So if you really want to know about ETs, then you need to read this document that gives you a small peek into the interdimensional world of extraterrestrials. The first part of the document gives a brief description of Roswell. If you're already familiar with that story, well, I suggest you skip down a little bit and continue reading. Keep in mind whether this story is true or not. I could never tell you or vouch for it. It may be written as a screenplay to keep the reader's attention. What I can vouch for is that everything written and said about ET's capabilities and their ships in this document is true. I have experienced some of these things for myself, among other things that I plan to later share. Here it is. UFO.blogspot.com. P.S. I will be sharing my ET experiences of traveling into space on this thread eventually, as I am still in the process of writing them down, but I will leave out the unexplainable that I experienced inside and outside of ET ships because I don't really know how to put it all down on paper. In fact, I don't think it's even possible. I have decided to just come out and share my experiences regardless of what people think, and I expect to be hammered and flamed for it all as usual here on ATS, but that is okay. I will answer everyone's questions anyway. I want people to understand that I have read many contact stories out there and only a very few give the slightest clue and reality of what ETs and their ships really are like, so I feel I owe it to at least try and get some information out to those diligently seeking the truth. If I ever write a book on all of my experiences, I will place it online free of charge, of course, for whoever chooses to download. Whether people believe me or not, at least I put it out there for someone to read and consider. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. Peace. Lou Baldin. Thursday, June 19, 2008. In league with the UFO. The Roswell Incident. Copyright 1997. By Lou Baldin. Out of print. On that day messengers shall go forth from me and ships. Ezekiel 30-9. Contents. Alien Documents 9. UFO Crash 15. Aladdin's Treasure. There are many gadgets on the ship. Most of them have been taken out of the ship and experimented with. Others, even though they are portable, cannot be taken out of the craft. An invisible force keeps them from being carried out. Every alien gadget somehow knows what its purpose is. Unlike human gadgets, such as hammers and toasters, which are static and only function correctly if at all with the help of a human, alien objects seem to have consciousness and perform duties on their own, if they feel like it. Author. Cover-up 18. Strange life forms inside the ship 24. The craft was like a living organism, claimed a document in one of the secret files. Miraculously, 3 weeks after the craft was discovered, the ship completely healed itself. If aliens did the repair work, they would have had to be invisible. Author. Disappearing Act 31. One alien device literally made doorways where none existed before. By using this device, the scientists were able to walk through walls, regardless of the composition or thickness of them. Author. Psychics attempt to unlock the mysteries 33. The paranormal approach. The use of psychics to unlock some of the secrets was tried. The expectation was that they would be less intimidated working in areas that are too strange for other scientists to work in. From the start, some of the psychics could not handle what they were shown and simply freaked out, as one scientist put it. There were a few who overcame their initial shock and actually communicated with the alien objects. But shortly after that, those few developed psychosis. Author. Alien Medical Instruments 45. This alien instrument, on its own, completed a complex surgical procedure in a split second. It cauterized all the blood vessels without damaging the eye socket or the eyeball. Everyone present knew that. This was beyond magic. It was outright scary. Author. Layers added to shield the President 54. Pandora's Box 58. Spontaneous Combustion 65. Alien Cover-Up 72. Power of the Intangibles 76. Biodegradable Alien Gadgets 82. Technology, where does it come from? 85. Alien Contact 90. Civilians used for experimentation 95. The Myth of Human Autonomy 97. Second Encounter 104. The reptilians just came right through the wall. I was awake and they seemed to be in a big rush. There were 2 of them and they took me away. Author Lou Baldin. In League with a UFO. Copyright 1997 by Lou Baldin. Out of print. November 6, 2007. Albuquerque, New Mexico. When I first read this book back in 1997 before I produced Earth Files, I thought the description of eerie non-human technologies matched what some people in the human abduction syndrome have described. I talked with Lou Baldin about the content, which he confirmed is based on first-hand factual knowledge, whose source he is still reluctant to reveal. I greatly appreciate Lou Baldin's permission to electronically reprint for the Earth Files audience In League with a UFO. Linda Moulton Howe. Prologue. My curiosity about extraterrestrial life was kindled when my father told me a story that took place when he was young. It was a few years before the advent of the Second World War. He and his brother were walking home from school when they noticed something odd in the sky. He described what he saw as 3 large metallic circles. The circles remained in the sky in close formation for a few minutes before dispersing in different directions and then vanishing. There were no clouds in the sky nor any factories in the town to pollute the air with smoke that could be mistaken for the 3 perfect circles. This took place in a small town in Italy in an era when the fantasies of space travel and the existence of aliens was unheard of. They did not have a telephone or a radio. Television was not yet invented. His family was typical for that community. Few who lived there were aware of the happenings outside of their own town. The only books available to him were school books. One was about arithmetic and the other book was about reading and writing. Humans are here to determine where we go after the moment of death, which is related to how much more information and truths we become aware of, or not. Author Lou Baldin. In League with a UFO. Copyright 1997 by Lou Baldin. Out of print. Lou Baldin was born on October 7, 1952, in Verona, Italy. In 1957, when Lou was 5, he moved with his parents and siblings to Paterson, New Jersey, where his father set up a bakery that was not successful. 3 years later in 1960, the family moved to Kansas City, Missouri. As a young child, Lou Baldin said he had other vivid memories of where he came from before he was born in Italy. That other existence was in a non-organic energy form. By age 12 and beyond, Lou also became aware of other non-human intelligences he characterizes as negative, sabotaging, and in competition with the goals of his prior existence where energy fields focus upon the evolution of souls. In League with a UFO. Copyright 1997 by Lou Baldin. Out of print. Start of the actual book. In League with the UFO. The Roswell Incident. Copyright 1997 First edition, by Lou Baldin. Copyright 2009 Second edition, by Lou Baldin. All names of characters appearing in these pages are fictitious except for those of public figures. Any similarities of characters to real persons, whether living or dead, excepting public figures, are coincidental. Any resemblance of incidents portrayed in this book to actual events, other than public events, is likewise coincidental. All rights reserved. Second edition. Prologue. The flying disc recovered in Roswell, New Mexico, in 1947 is one of many contacts with extraterrestrial real-life forms humans have had in the last century, and this new century. Roswell received the bulk of the interest because personnel in the United States government inadvertently reported it to a worldwide audience. Days after an officer from the military released the news that an alien ship had crashed in a field near Roswell, New Mexico, a substantial amount of repudiation of the story poured out from military headquarters debunking the original account. However, not everyone could be silenced. For some of the individuals, those that experienced the phenomena firsthand, the cover-up did not alleviate their new paranormal realities. During that period many of the people touched by the extraterrestrial affair such as nurses, doctors, scientists, and military personnel, the people with first-hand knowledge, suddenly lost interest in telling their stories. Those people had been debriefed on the consequences should they talk about what they saw and experienced in Roswell. Much of what leaked out in the last 3 decades came from people that had previously sworn secrecy about their involvement while employed by the newly developed covert society. These people lived most of their lives working in clandestine laboratories set up in several places around the world. Some of the scientists in those programs had physical contact with extraterrestrials and their magical technologies salvaged from the alien ship at Roswell. A few of those people eventually wrote books describing some of the things they worked around, but for the fantastic nature of their claims, few people believed them. Others, with more profound information and fearful of losing credibility, careers, and even their life, have no interest in going public. Some people remained quiet out of duty to country. Most of these people have gone to their graves taking their secrets with them. However, not all secrets went to the grave. Some remained hidden in dusty attics and damp basements, stored away under old magazines and books in boxes, awaiting discovery. Much of that material, as is true with countless other historical documents throughout history, has been forever lost to posterity. No one will ever know how much secret information from that incident in history, and other covert projects, made it to the landfills, but some journals have mysteriously resurfaced after the authors passed away. When I first wrote In League with a UFO, I did not want to be associated with the UFO crowd, and was not sure how to place the information into the public arena without admitting my personal experiences in the subject. I put the manuscript away for 2 years before revisiting it again, and finally publishing the manuscript in 1997. Unbeknownst to me at the time, and coincidentally I might add, my book came out in print 2 weeks before the 50th anniversary of the Roswell crash. My publisher informed me of that fact and suggested that I should take advantage of the crowds that would converge on Roswell, New Mexico, on July of 1997, to sell my books. I declined, and my book remained for the most part unknown, by the general public, for nearly 10 years, after publication. A few books sold at local bookstores. In the second year, I was invited to the filming of a documentary concerning UFOs and abductions, where I was introduced to prominent people in the UFO arena, but clueless of who they were at the time. I attended the conference but I did not participate in the documentary. However, I did 2 radio interviews on a later date. In League with a UFO, the Roswell incident. How I came to have this information is as strange as the information itself. I was a home builder at the time with no desire to write a book and little if any writing ability to write a book. I received a call one day and invited to have lunch by an individual I did not know. I often met with clients and suppliers in the construction fields that invited me to lunch for the purpose of sales pitches concerning building materials. I met with this fellow at an upscale restaurant and we talked about writing books instead of construction materials. During our conversation, he handed me some papers that he took from his briefcase and showed them to me. I do not recall what we talked about or what was on those papers, nor has that person ever contacted me again. However, 2 or 3 weeks after meeting that individual I began to write down some of the material that is in this book. UFO crash. The year was 1947, the place, Roswell, New Mexico. On July 2nd, of that year, some of the townspeople made reports of a bright disk streaming across the sky to the local authorities. The unidentified flying object, UFO, fell from the sky and crashed approximately 75 miles northwest of town that day. A rancher, or farmer that heard the crash, thought that an airplane had fallen into a field a short distance from his house, and went to investigate. What he found at the scene was not anything he could relate to, and the object certainly did not look to him like it was from this world. He was so mystified about what he saw that he failed to report the incident until 5 days later, on July 7th, during some other business he had to do in town. He told some friends that the craft was made of a strange material that had no weight to it, yet seemed to have incredible strength. Once the news spread about the rancher's claim of finding a UFO, the excitement, mixed with apprehension about a possible alien invasion, spread throughout the town like brush fire. It was not long after the rancher showed the crash site to one of the military officers that the rancher abruptly became silent on the topic and spoke no more about it. He refused to discuss what he had found with the media or his friends. Nevertheless, the news was out, and it quickly traveled around the country and the world as reporters inundated that small New Mexico town. Ironically, Much of what is publicly known concerning the UFO crash was released to the media by a public relations officer from the military. The same military that later denied the story. An officer in the military told the press that a flying disc had crashed and that the military had recovered the disc. From that statement, people all over the world wanted to know more. Some of the talk around the town focused on topics that questioned the very nature of humanity's existence. What if we are not alone in the universe? Was the crash proof that other life forms existed? And if so, what a scary thought that was. Those were some of the concerns brought up by the town folk. Orson Welles' narration of War of the Worlds, in 1938, was fresh on the minds of many people in Roswell, and people around the country too. The alleged alien crash implied that a real invasion from other worlds could be imminent. There was anxiety mixed with excitement about such a prospect. Those were certainly dire implications, and the government soon realized it was not in a position to answer the queries and concerns coming at them by the potentially panic-provoking reporters. In league with a UFO. The Roswell incident. Not knowing what the military had in its possession, and at the same time attempting to halt what had turned into a media circus of paranoia, the military retracted its earlier statement about a flying disc, and blaming the misunderstanding on a misinformed lower-ranking officer. The military's updated report simply stated that a new kind of weather balloon tested in the nearby military base is what they recovered from the now famous Roswell crash. The crash of a weather balloon was easier to swallow than alleged aliens from space, and a lot less frightening for the public at large. Few people doubted the military's revised explanations and welcomed them, and the public soon forgot the whole matter. Cover-up. The top brass in the military establishment was unable to give the President of the United States pertinent details of what they had in their possession, other than the ship appeared to be extraterrestrial and not of this world. That was enough information for the President to make the decision to keep the whole affair a secret until further notice. A covert committee was convened with the sole purpose of studying the alien ship. The committee, under the jurisdiction of the Air Force, received its funding from them. The committee operated under the pretext of integrating new technologies for the development of superior maneuverability and faster flying military aircraft. The facility was eventually located near the Nevada-Arizona border and is now popularly known as Area 51. The base was one of the most top-secret bases in the country until sometime in the 1970s. That is when UFO buffs began mentioning the secret base in their meetings and the media began writing about the secret base in newspapers and magazines. Information about UFOs came from a multitude of sources. From the average citizen that reported to the media that they had seen aircraft perform fantastic feats of maneuverability near and around military bases, and from professionals that claimed what they saw defied all concepts of what military aircraft, or any human-constructed aircraft, was capable of without breaking apart. Moving diagonally while traveling at a high rate of speed was one of the more bizarre instances reported. Other sources or leaks came from former military personnel that worked at certain bases and spoke under the condition that their identities would remain hidden. Area 51 remains a top-secret facility, but everyone knows its whereabouts now. The base serves the covered community well, but also acts as a decoy, keeping the public focused on it and away from other concealed operations across the country. The military had in its possession a flying machine so advanced and mysterious that some of the scientists involved in the program speculated that it could only be from other dimensions. The alien ship was capable of traveling from one dimension to another, as a means to traverse the vastness of space inside our Milky Way galaxy. The ship was like a living organism, claimed a document in one of the secret files. When recovered, the ship had a large hole on one side of it. At first, the committee believed that the ship exploded due to a leaky antimatter-type component in the ship. The explosion annihilated a large portion of the ship. The actual size of the alien ship was not mentioned. Miraculously, 3 weeks after the craft's discovery, the ship completely healed, repaired, itself. To say the least, it was a very mysterious event, Since the committee monitored the ship 24 hours a day, and no alien work crew materialized to perform the work. If aliens repaired the ship, they were invisible, or the aliens rendered the guards unconscious and implanted false memories into their minds. The scientists that monitored the ship reported that the healing of the ship occurred similar to a human flesh wound. The skin or surface of the ship grew back over a period of days. In reality, there is no similarity to the human immunology and that of the ship's own ability to heal. Had a human suffered an equivalent trauma as the ship did, nothing would have grown back and the human would have died. Once the ship healed, there was no sign of the original damage. The debris from the explosion covered several acres of land with material that had the appearance and consistency of aluminum foil, except that aluminum foil remains crumpled when crumpled and is easily damaged. The alien material bounced back without a wrinkle and appeared to be indestructible. Since the ship repaired itself, the scientists investigating the ship were unable to determine the cause of the crash. After further studies of the material and its strength, the scientists concluded that nothing earthly could have harmed the ship in any way, nor caused the slightest damage to it, including a lightning strike, one of the original theories on what triggered the saucer to crash. Of the 3 aliens recovered from the craft, 1 was dead and 2 were alive. The 3 aliens removed from the ship at the time of its recovery were taken to an undisclosed location away from the ship. The secret committee in possession of the ship had no knowledge of the whereabouts of the beings once other people removed the aliens, nor were they sure of the numbers of aliens. At that time, the committee was unconcerned about the alien beings. The committee members had plenty on their plate with the ship and the mysterious cargo living inside of it. Several months passed before the scientists felt somewhat comfortable working in the ship. Entering the ship was as if walking into a time warp, any sense of reality instantly vanished. Wristwatches did not function correctly and neither did the 5 human senses. Things smelled differently or not at all while in the ship. Body odor lost its pungency. However, the food they brought into the ship for experimental purposes gave off offensive smells as if the food became rancid. Perfume and cologne were undetectable until the scientists stepped out of the ship and their noses once again adjusted to the scent. From the experiments with food, the scientists determined that the food was not permanently affected or altered, and the food regained the natural smell and taste when it was taken out of the ship. The other senses, sight, hearing, and touch, changed for the better. If a certain scientist wore glasses, he needed to remove them to see. It was the same with hearing. All sound was clear regardless of previous hearing abilities. Touch was sensitive to the point of being erotic. The ship simply felt good. But the scientists were not accustomed to feeling optimally good and healthy, and it took time, most never did, before they became comfortable with the invigorating sensations inside the ship's environment. When the scientists spent long periods in the ship, coming out of the ship was akin to severe jet lag. They became irritable, groggy, drained, achy, and needed time to readjust to feeling lousy again. Ironically, feeling lousy was the normal feeling of their bodies they had forgotten about while in the ship. Although the senses were on high alert while in the ship, the description that was unanimous among those that entered the ship was that it was surreal. They were in a dreamy state of mind, yet, they were energized and not at all drowsy while in the ship. That state of clarity turned into apprehension, and for some, nightmarish. The persistent feeling that something living, extraterrestrial, was present in the ship with them, behind them, around them, like wisps or shadows that never quite came into focus, gnawed at them. The unknown elements of the ship were unnerving for those working inside the ship. No doubts in the minds of the scientists that they were not alone while in the ship, regardless the fact that the 3 or so beings had been removed from it, or had they. There was no way of knowing whether all the alien beings were taken off the ship. To compensate for the time distortions while in the ship, scientists posted sentries outside the ship and had one of them enter the ship every few minutes to announce the time to those inside. When the disk was first discovered, The scientists spent hours and sometimes days inside the ship, oblivious to the fact that even a single minute had passed. Sometimes it was the opposite, and it seemed like they spent an eternity inside the ship when only a few minutes passed. Working long stretches of time without losing energy or focus was common and addictive, and created havoc for those with families. The interior of the craft was much larger than its physical exterior suggested. No one was sure whether all the rooms and compartments on the ship were discovered. Everyone that entered the ship came out with different numbers of rooms. Even the same individual would come out with a different number each time he left the craft. Another problem the scientists faced was leaving the ship with intelligible notes. Everything they wrote down ended up being a maze of half-written words and sentences void of meaning once they exited the ship. The scientists attempted to take pictures of what they believed to be instruments, and the interiors of rooms of the ship, but were unsuccessful. When the film was developed, it was as if it had been exposed to light. They tried different systems of shielding the camera from the unknown radiation. They enclosed the camera in various alloys, plastics, and exotic cutting-edge ceramics, in hopeless attempts to insulate the film. Nothing worked. The ship contained numerous gadgets. Some of the gadgets were removed from the ship during experimentations with them. Some gadgets, even though they were portable while in the ship, could not be taken out of the ship. An invisible force field inside the ship stopped the scientists from leaving the ship with certain alien gadgets. No one was able to figure out how to circumvent the force. Alien gadgets somehow knew what their purpose was. Unlike human gadgets such as hammers and toasters, which required human input to function, or an electrical outlet, alien gadgets had an independent life of their own. Alien gadgets appeared to have consciousness, they were alive, and performed duties independently and without any known power source such as batteries, solar cells, electrical cords, and operated indefinitely. In league with a UFO. The Roswell incident. The opening or doorway into the alien ship was another mystery. When a scientist approached the craft with the intention of entering it, an opening appeared instantly. If there was no intention by the scientist of entering the ship, nothing opened. The ship could be entered from any location, top, sides, and from the bottom of the ship. Wherever a scientist approached the ship, that is where they entered. When an opening manifested, it led to the same central location, regardless of the point of entry. The craft was also able to absorb several people into it at once. A feat that left many of the scientists spooked beyond comprehension. According to one testimony, if all the technicians that were analyzing the ship formed a circle around it and intended to enter it in mass, they all did. There were no doors, as we know and understand doors, only an opening that accommodated the size of the person or persons entering the ship. The ship appeared to work something like osmosis. The person desiring entry and standing next to the ship instantly found himself or herself inside the ship. Yet, if there was no mental desire to enter or exit, the ship remained impregnable. No man-made machinery could break into the ship. Weird and wondrous life forms. Everything in the ship possessed unique personalities that were also capable, in the most bizarre ways, of conveying emotions to the scientists. The best description of these gadgets by the scientists was that they were like synthetic versions of insects and small animals. They lacked organic qualities in the respect that they did not eat, drink, or eliminate, yet the gadgets did not have inert qualities of synthetic human-made materials, either. The alien gadgets squirmed, crawled, levitated, jumped, flew, and walked. The size of the living gadgets ranged from a deer tick to a basketball, with the majority of the items fitting in the palm of the average person's hand. The scientists treated some gadgets as delightful toys, and occasionally fought over them like children, impatiently waiting their turn to inspect, explore, and be entertained by the gadgets. However, some of the alien gadgets turned out to be monsters. Many of the gadgets appeared metallic, sturdy, and unbelievably strong, and at the same time malleable, like putty. The ambiguity of the strange substance that the gadgets were made of confounded the research teams. The consensus was that the material from which the ship and its contents consisted of made a mockery of human physics. Alien gadgets did not function similarly to Earth-based machinery with gears, motors, wheels, wiring, or state-of-the-art solid-state microelectronics. Nor did the gadgets function physiologically, with bone, blood, and muscle, or plant and marine life. It appeared that every molecule of whatever these things were made of acted in unison in the same manner that water molecules join together to create ocean waves. There were no human means available to dissect the alien gadgets. They were impervious to our inferior technology to penetrate and analyze them. The alien things had no seams or edges to pry open, no organs or flesh to probe. They could not be weighed, or their contents measured. They appeared cast from one solid piece with no individual parts, except that they were not solid, as we understand solid to be. One analogy describing alien material was malleable and solid, but temperature had nothing to do with either state, as it does with Earth metals, liquids, and gases. Alien gadgets transitioned to 4 physical stages: solid, malleable, liquid, and gas, without external heat variation or pressure changes. Change happened at the discretion of the alien gadget and not the human handler. Attempts to study the items were further blunted when X-ray failed to penetrate the alien material. There was no human means to understand what made the gadgets operate other than from the paranormal. Nothing connected with the ship aged, wore out, or became obsolete. Rather, the things in the ship and the ship itself appeared to improve over time. The gadgets also learned the habits of the handlers. An example: if a hammer were an alien gadget, all one needed to do was use it once, and from then on the hammer would repeat the action indefinitely, hitting the nail without the need to handle the hammer manually. The hammer would operate on its own, although someone had to hold the nail and pray that the hammer did not miss. Alien technology, however perfect, is problematic when interfacing with inferior technology and lack of understanding. The scientists discovered that controlling an alien item once it activated was a dangerous proposition. Several accidents and fatalities due to human-alien interactions happened. The ship had 2 or 3 rooms equipped like futuristic surgical operating rooms. The rooms were brighter and had the feeling of a place where flesh encountered scalpel. Members of the team believed that many, if not all of the gadgets on the ship, performed medical functions. After suffering a few mishaps, loss of life and limb, from coming into direct contact with bizarrely alive alien gadgets, during experimentation on each other, the scientists decided to utilize cadavers instead of themselves in order to reduce pain, suffering, and death among its members. After many failed attempts to get the alien gadgets to function on cadavers, the alien gadgets did not respond to dead flesh. The scientists began using live animals such as rats, rabbits, pigs, chickens, mice, cows, horses, toads, fish, and other types of wildlife. Some alien instruments activated, woke up, when exposed to certain animals. Cattle, horses, and humans always triggered the alien gadgets to perform a freakish maneuver. The alien gadgets had no outward appearances or labeling that identified the functions associated with them. Scientists discovered what each gadget did mostly by accident. Deciphering what any gadget was capable of doing or performing was impossible using the tried-and-true methods of deduction. The scientists had to stumble around, sometimes awkwardly and maybe foolishly, until a function or procedure presented itself. Discoveries during testing happened by placing the alien gadgets directly on the animals or in close proximity to the animals, and then a wait-and-see approach went into play. A response from the gadgets might take place instantly, or it could take hours, and in some cases, more than a day before the gadgets decided to do something. The subjects, animal or human, were not sedated during the experiments because sedatives seemed to compromise the testing. In some cases, the alien gadgets were fastened to the subjects with the use of straps, clamps, and tape. Holding the alien gadget in place had its own consequences for the experimenters. Sometimes the alien gadget performed its thing on the person holding it, which was not a pretty picture, according to one source. When dormant, some of the gadgets were spherical and had the appearance of black ball bearings, other gadgets strayed from the pack and changed colors while inert. Most of the items were smaller than a baseball and larger than a golf ball, but new gadgets appeared and disappeared regularly. Touching certain items sucked the heat from the fingertips, and in some instances caused a few scientists to lose parts of their fingers from frostbite or exotic alien radiation. At times the gadget's physical weight, referred to as obstinacy in the documents, was such that the scientists could not pick up or move the gadgets, even with the use of machines and other leveraging devices. Other times those same immovable objects were lighter than air, and bobbed around the laboratory like helium balloons at a birthday party. During the experiments with animals, the scientists discovered that some gadgets responded when they came within 1 inch from touching the animal. Other gadgets needed full contact with the animal before activating. Gadgets were deemed activated when they reacted in any number of ways, such as change color, size, or shape, or outright performed a function on the subject animal, as in, remove a specific body part or perform a biopsy, or any number of strange transactions that the scientists did not fully comprehend. What the alien instruments did was unclear with the early experimenters. In some of the early notes that survived were statements that the alien objects mutilated the animals by removing tissue and sometimes organs from them for no apparent reason. The animals were healthy before the experiments and might have remained so had the scientists understood how to reverse, or somehow communicate their desire to the gadgets. For instance, please put the bunny's head back on. Experimenting on humans was not taboo in the 1940s, and was practiced in many countries as well as in the United States, albeit covertly. Even before testing began on human guinea pigs, some scientists that fiddled with the alien gadgets unwittingly were maimed, killed, or something more horrible happened to them. No one will ever know about the more horrible since the people simply disappeared, taken by the gadgets to an unknown place, and never found again. At the onset of the program, accidents were recorded officially, but as the years went by and the program became increasingly shrouded in secrecy, information was shared unofficially, through the grapevine. It was forbidden to write certain things down, nevertheless, some scientists secretly did so. Information that made it on paper or other storage devices such as tape recorders and photography, was never meant for sharing with other scientists in the program but was to be forwarded directly to the committee only. Therefore, how many scientists lost their lives from contact with the alien gadgets no one will ever know. One of the first injuries recorded took place early in the program. It happened to a metallurgist. He was studying the bizarre behavior of exotic alien metal while it transfigured during a test. Me and a colleague were monitoring a batch of alien gadgets assigned to them. Scientists doing experiments with alien gadgets were located in a separate building from where the alien ship was kept. Divide and conquer was the theme. By placing some distance between the craft and the alien objects, the scientists were hoping to eliminate any interference or potential influence that the ship might have on the gadgets. The scientists were concerned that the ship somehow remained in communication with its spawn. Another reason they experimented off the ship was that the ship was a strange place to work. Inside the ship was real-life Alice in Wonderland stuff. It was nearly impossible to get anything meaningful done while alien creatures jumped around and harassed the scientists, when the scientists were inside the ship. The metallurgist and a colleague had scattered the alien gadgets around a large table in his lab. The scientists released a rabbit in the midst of the objects to see if any of the gadgets would activate by the presence of the animal. They observed and waited. They watched for the slightest response from the gadgets as the rabbit moved around the table eating the lettuce. The lettuce was strategically placed around the table so that the rabbit would make maximum contact with all the items that were put out that day. The rabbit did not seem bothered by the alien gadgets. The rabbit was unaware that any one of the alien gadgets it brushed up against could snatch it up, skin it alive, gut it, and have it fully cooked in less than a couple of minutes. The job had many hidden dangers, but the scientists ate well. Knowing the hazards of mishandling the alien gadgets, it was incomprehensible that scientists working with such volatile objects took the risks that they did. As the rabbit hopped about the table, the scientist noticed that one of the alien gadgets changed color as the rabbit approached it. Believing that the metal was about to change shape, the scientist wanted to hold the alien object in his hand to get a feel for what was taking place inside the metal. The metal quivered, so he took it to his desk where the light was better. As he studied it under the light of his desk lamp, his face made contact with the gadget. The gadget activated and instantly scooped out the scientist's eyeball. It happened so quickly that the scientist did not have time to drop the alien gadget, which was still holding his eyeball securely in its scoop-like claw. His colleague, after seeing what had happened, thought that the alien gadget was attacking his friend and summoned one of the guards posted outside the room in the hall. The guard reluctantly grabbed the instrument with the eye attached to it and slowly removed it from the traumatized scientist's hand. The scientist let go of it as he collapsed to the floor, dazed, as if he had been hit with a baseball bat over the head. No blood spilled from the scientist's eye socket, but he was in severe pain and went into shock. His colleague was perplexed over what to do with the eyeball. He told the guard to remain with the injured man and cautiously took the eyeball along with the alien gadget, which remained attached to the eye, and put the eye and alien gadget into the icebox in the lunchroom. The scientists were unable to save the eye, even though it was not damaged in any way. The doctors that examined the injured man were baffled by the precision in which the eye was removed. No doctors or technique that they were aware of could perform that kind of operation. The alien instrument, on its own, completed a complex procedure in a split second. The alien gadget cauterized all the blood vessels without damaging the eye socket or the eyeball. Disappearing act. When the scientists began experimenting with the alien gadgets, the gadgets began disappearing. At first, it was thought that a trickster, one of the scientists, was playing pranks on them, perhaps taking the objects from the laboratories and returning them back to the ship. That scenario was impossible because all the labs were equipped with personalized lock systems, and none of the labs had been broken into. The scientists were baffled, but after a few weeks, a pattern emerged. Every item from the ship, regardless of where it was, whether it was in another part of the country, or some other place in the world, vanished exactly 3 days from when taken out of the ship. The items then emerged back on the ship precisely the moment they vanished, or thereabouts. Since time was tricky business on a ship and difficult to gauge, no one ever really knew. As the scientists had suspected, the alien ship somehow remained in contact with its brood of gadgets, no matter the distance or location from the mother ship. There was so much magic in that ship that it was practically impossible for the scientists to remain focused on their work. At times, the scientists showed signs associated with psychosis. Their personalities gyrated from giddy to despair and demonic. On several occasions, guards were summoned to the labs to restrain belligerent scientists making preposterous accusations and demands on their fellow associates. One scientist insisted that a co-worker kneel down and kiss a ring on his finger, then cried hysterically when his colleague refused the demand. Another scientist threatened to kill a colleague's family if he did not receive a birthday card from him. 2 others played like children, singing and clapping their hands while talking to make-believe friends. Those cases are a small sampling of strange happenings that took place and affected many of those involved with the covert projects. Those were not episodes of bored scientists horsing around with their colleagues. Many of those affected had to be restrained and taken off the base. Some of them recovered within a few days or weeks, and had little recollection of what happened to them. In some cases, the scientists were permanently institutionalized. The scientists were never able to master the alien gadgets because the gadgets seemed to play mind games with them, kind of a Simon Says routine, do as I say, not as I do. The gadgets did not talk, verbally, anyway, which would not have been surprising, since the alien gadgets seemed to be able to do everything else, including sending messages to other gadgets and devices, and to the scientists via extrasensory means. Psychics try unlocking the mysteries. The committee tried using psychics to unlock some of the secrets of the alien gadgets. The expectation was that clairvoyants would be less intimidated working in areas that were paranormal in nature than the scientists. From the onset, some of the psychics were unable to cope with what they were shown and put in contact with, and handled some situations much worse than the scientists. Many of the clairvoyants simply freaked out, as one scientist put it. There were a few who overcame the initial shock and actually communicated with the alien gadgets. But shortly after doing so, more than half of them developed psychosis, and were dropped from the program. Multiple layers of scientists worked on the highly classified projects. Some knew the truth and the origin of what they were working on. Others were kept in the dark and believed that they were working with advanced, human-based, scientific projects for the military and private industry. Communication between the many groups was non-existent. All the individual groups reported their findings and results to a single committee. Each group or unit had 2 or 3 specialists chosen from such diverse fields as physics, medicine, engineering, psychiatry, astronomy, parapsychology, mathematics, clergy, philosophy, and several other unnamed disciplines. The committee was comprised of 7 individuals. The number changed through the years, as did the numbers of scientists in the program. Some of the committee members came from the ranks of the military, the rest were civilians. The President of the United States personally recruited the members of the committee. That policy changed in the 1960s, and the process of choosing members remains elusive. After reviewing the first reports from the scientists, the committee was certain about one thing, that the aliens allowed the human race to keep the alien ship, with its marvels and terrors, as a gift. Still, some members of the committee were concerned about an extraterrestrial Trojan horse. Committee members were cognizant that the aliens had the capacity to take back their ship at any time. Why didn't they? The committee members were aware that the aliens could do that after they learned how independent each individual gadget on the ship was, as was the ship itself. The ship could function without the assistance of the alien crew. Some on the committee believed that the gadgets were the real alien crew. It was apparent to the committee that after the ship repaired itself that there was nothing that could keep it from leaving on its own. The mission of the committee was to find a weakness in the alien ship. However, the more they probed, the more they realized how weak human technology was in comparison to alien technology. One scientist exclaimed, "There was no comparison to human and alien technology, we are merely over the aliens Einstein to the nth degree." That is why every president, beginning with Harry Truman, was unable to confirm the existence of extraterrestrials, but forced to deny their very existence. No president was going to come out and tell the world that extraterrestrials are on this planet, and in space around the Earth, and can squash the human race at will if they so choose. 2 of the psychics brought into the program did what their colleagues could not, and excelled at breaking through a few of the complex barriers put up by the alien gadgets. The psychics communicated telepathically on a very basic level with the alien gadgets, like a first grader directing questions to a college professor. The professors, alien gadgets, were amused and sometimes made an effort to explain complex material to the first graders, scientists and psychics. Big discoveries come from many little steps, and throughout the years, several little steps fell into place like pieces of a large puzzle. One of the small steps led the scientists towards a huge breakthrough. The psychics figured out how to unlock the secrets to a certain batch of alien devices that most of the scientists had given up on. One of those gadgets made openings appear where none existed. That device made it possible to walk through walls or other barriers regardless of the composition or thickness of the barrier. The scientists simply willed themselves through the barrier while in possession of that gadget. The device did not change shape, as did many of the other alien items when activated. It was about the size of a piece of chalk, the kind that teachers use for writing on blackboards, except that it was black and not white. The gadget had a strange absorption quality to it and gave the person holding it the sensation that he could be absorbed into it as if it were a miniature black hole. When the chalk-like gadget activated, lights in the area dimmed. The gadget extracted energy from its surroundings. Electrical items in the vicinity such as appliances, televisions, radios, lights, and to some degree, humans and pets, were affected. The device pulled the heat out of the room or area that it activated in. It was as if a cold front had moved through. Scientists using the device often wore suitable clothing for the sudden chill, which was awkward when temperatures outside were hot and sticky. The person holding the gadget had the sensation of suction similar to holding a vacuum cleaner nozzle to bare skin. Another interesting device the psychics brought to life served to immobilize a person or animal and kept the victim paralyzed for an indefinite length of time. The device was similar to a laser pointer except for the fact that the beam projected 3 feet, like a slim version of the Star Wars lightsaber. The alien lightsaber instantly paralyzed man or beast the moment the light made contact with the cranium. Under the paralysis, the person or animal remained fully conscious, but unable to move in any way except for the blinking of the eyelids. People touched by the beam FR0 and the saber were literally frozen in their strides and had to be kept from falling, if they were off balance, and let down gently, otherwise they sustained injuries from the fall. They remained in that frozen state as long as the beam made contact with any part of the head. Once the beam was turned off or away from the person regained mobility in a few minutes. Additionally, the person affected by the beam suffered a mild case of amnesia and disorientation. Those affected never recalled what happened to them moments before, during, and after the paralysis. One scientist who succumbed to the paralysis during an experiment equated the sensation to a high-pitched ringing in the ears and in the mind, accompanied by a mild dizzy spell. Every breakthrough whetted the appetite of the committee, and when the discoveries waned, they became impatiently hungry for more. It was during one such lull that the committee seriously began discussing the use of civilians as guinea pigs. The psychics did not produce the consistent results the committee was looking for. There was too much downtime between discoveries, which left large gaps in the workloads of scientists and technicians involved in the various programs. That was unacceptable, due to the vast alien cargo that begged to be unlocked, and the vast alien secrets unleashed. One drawback was that placing too much pressure on the psychics quickened their burnout rate, which was high. Qualified replacements were difficult to find, and alternative ways and the means to extract information remained a constant struggle. Had the psychics made better progress, it might have alleviated the committee from making the dreadful decisions they faced. Experimenting on unsuspecting people became a valid option, regardless its distasteful nature. The decision to experiment on humans posed a dilemma for many of the committee members. How would they carry out experimentation on human subjects and still be able to sleep at night? Moreover, that was only the compassionate component of the problem. There were potential legal issues too, should that evil deed ever get out into the public. Those kinds of questions surfaced more often as the decade of the 1940s, where violations against humans were easier to hide, ended. The era for the greater good turned into the 195 OS, 196 OS, and 1970s, where the mood of the nation changed radically against Big Brother-type government institutions, to outright mistrust and disdain for higher authority. Americans became more cynical and suspicious of the military and the government in general, as a direct consequence of the Vietnam War, and the President Richard Nixon saga. Even the most hard-boiled among the committee members knew that it was only a matter of time before their covert organization faced the real possibility of becoming discovered and exposed. When that day comes, heads will roll, like at the French Revolution with the guillotine, proclaimed one of the scientists in the report. None believed it would happen in their lifetime, but there was always that possibility. Committee members were venomously divided on that one issue. Because of the rift, it was feared that someone on the committee might leak that damning information to the press. Concerns over using human specimens in the labs were prevalent in the 1970s, but it was also an issue at the onset of the covert program. After reviewing several options concerning the use of people to experiment on in the late 1940s, the first committee resolved their dilemma rather easily. They took their alien gadgets and performed experiments in the battlefield. The two military personnel that were members of the committee proposed the idea. They made that suggestion to their colleagues on the committee after a briefing with the president and his chiefs of staff. At the briefing with the president, they learned that the possibility of America going to war with Korea was highly probable. They learned at the meeting that such a scenario would solve several problems. The committee would set up a MASH unit near the front lines and receive the worst casualties of the war. Many things remain hidden behind the curtain of battle when the obvious dangers of war go into the equation and overlooked. Few on the committee were excited about the prospects of going into the battlefield and exposing themselves and their scientific people to mortal danger. Dead soldiers tell no tales. That was the bottom line. Secrecy was paramount and fresh meat plentiful in the hellhole of war. The use of mortally wounded soldiers was no less repugnant back then as it is now, unless they were enemy soldiers. The committee subjected soldiers and other victims of the war to experiments for the betterment of mankind, and only those with a low probability of survival made the grade. The Korean War provided the committee with multiple opportunities. They had the use of captured prisoners and enemy casualties to experiment with. They also tested the alien gadgets for suitability as weapons. However, before the operation got off the ground they had many obstacles to work out. The alien gadgets mysteriously regrouped back on the ship every 3 days, so they had to figure out a way to get the ship near the war zone. Moving it created problems. Various unrelated research programs existed that required the ship to remain where it was. The site was not disclosed. Human experimentation was a fraction of the whole program that was taking place around the alien ship during that time. Cutting off other interested entities was a strategic nightmare and many toes stepped on in the scramble to retain influence over the ship. How, and to what extent the alien gadgets affected the human anatomy was of the greatest concern to the powers in charge. Therefore, control of the ship went to that element of the research group. Okinawa, Japan, was the place the alien ship would call home for a time. Okinawa was minutes away by air from Korea, and there was already a large American military presence on the island of Okinawa. At that time, Okinawa belonged to the American military. After the defeat of Japan during World War II, the Japanese mainland, as well as some of the islands including Okinawa, was undergoing massive economic revamping and infrastructure rebuilding. Okinawa sustained major damage during the war and was a strategic location for American military interests in the area, therefore, it received substantial aid. Due to all the undergoing military construction, the installation of a highly classified operation concerning the alien ship took place without anyone noticing. There were already American scientists in Japan that were studying the effects of radiation poisoning on the victims of the atomic war with Japan. 5 years earlier in 1945, atomic bombs devastated Nagasaki and Hiroshima. The devastation of that war was still apparent in 1950, when the committee set up its headquarters in the region. The exact location the committee chose for the alien ship remains unknown. The alien ship was only located on the island for the duration of the Korean War. There were those on the committee who had compassion for the Japanese people after witnessing the effects of the bombs on that country. Those committee members hoped to learn enough about the alien gadgets to undo some of the radiation damage that inflicted thousands of Japanese people. They did not perform experiments on the Japanese. They waited until there was conclusive evidence on what the instruments were capable of before any attempts to treat civilians with the alien technology proceeded. In a war situation, where life, death, misery, and brutality flashed by at a rapid pace daily, few committee members felt that what they were about to do in Korea was wrong. They knew that humanity received a gift: the alien ship, with its still to be realized unknown possibilities. It fell to the committee to discover and put those gadgets to good use. Others on the committee were more cautious and believed that what they had in their possession could be subverted, made into weapons, which could unleash a nightmare onto the world that would eclipse the horror of the atomic bombs dropped on Japan. As the committee had expected from the information given to them by sources in their organization, the Soviet-trained forces of N0RTH Korea invaded South Korea in the summer of 1950. Within days of that invasion, United Nations troops led by General Douglas MacArthur entered the fighting and began pushing the North Korean troops back behind the 38th parallel. 2.5 years earlier the committee had come into possession of the alien ship. Now, with the war started, they knew they were on the verge of unlocking some of the most fantastic secrets in the universe. From the start, it was not a smooth-running operation. As they set up camp, advancing North Korean troops overran their base. The committee lost doctors and technicians, as well as the alien instruments. The alien instruments always returned to the ship undamaged, where they were retrieved repeatedly. Not so for the scientists and technicians who were killed or injured. Due to the frequent attacks on their base, the experiments were chaotic and often compromised. The stress of being minutes from the front lines and always in fear of enemy troops overrunning them, took its toll on the staff. Of the 3 years that the war lasted, only a fraction of the information collected was considered valuable. The bulk of what they had recorded was lost in transit from the moves to avoid enemy fire. Much of what was salvaged was suspect because of the brutal conditions under which it was collected. The team members chose to work close to the front lines so that they could work with injured soldiers that were fresh off the battlefield and with some life remaining in them. The MASH unit did serve in its true capacity and doctored wounded soldiers without experimenting on them. The scientists and doctors only experimented with the soldiers who were beyond hope or enemy. Nevertheless, some progress happened during those years. The committee was able to forward a breakdown describing the usefulness of certain alien gadgets in treating disease like malaria, dysentery, and reversing the effects of frostbite and restoring eyesight, by performing complex surgery in the field. According to a report, many miraculous recoveries from ailments to war wounds took place. Unfortunately, many of the methods and techniques performed by the doctors were lost. Those helped by the alien gadgets included North and South Korean civilian refugees from both sides of the conflict. That particular committee was not privy to the nature or extent that the alien gadgets were used as weapons, or even if they were. Any such tests were carried out by other covert units and monitored by other covert committees. The President of the United States received briefings daily on all findings regarding that project. The President received a summary that described in detail some of the more prominent findings and occurrences from the committee. The report outlined descriptions of the gadgets and some of their capabilities. A sketch of what the gadgets looked like when they morphed into operation, activated, and performed their magic was part of the reports. However, the sketches were of little help and only served to show what the gadgets looked like for a brief time during the period it took to sketch them. Change was the only constant concerning the alien gadgets. Once they activated, they oscillated continuously from one shape to another, and sometime their color would do the same. One scientist described the gadgets as having similar attributes as squids and chameleons, with their abilities to change color rapidly, matching their new environment. All of the gadgets in the report were identified with at least one function, although the report stated that every gadget could possibly perform dozens or even hundreds of other functions. One report stressed that it would take years of study just to scratch the surface of what these things are capable of doing. For that reason, some on the committee made suggestions to the President that certain items, those deemed not to pose a national security breach, be released on a limited basis to their civilian counterparts. They were convinced it was time to let the civilian scientific community have accesses to a few of the alien gadgets. Their thoughts were that something of this magnitude needed study by a broad range of institutions, so that the benefits could be discovered and placed in use immediately. Others on the committee disagreed and felt that this could be a trap by an unknown race of aliens attempting to get us to let down our guard, rationalizing that the aliens might be trying to lure the human race into thinking they are benevolent, or possibly to intimidate mankind by letting humans know what they are up against. The president received briefings on both views and decided it was bad policy to acknowledge a power infinitely superior to that of humans. The reason, he told the committee members, was that the sense of balance and security Americans enjoyed could be disrupted by that kind of revelation, possibly damaging the American economy and throwing it, and then the rest of the world, into chaos. He emphasized to the committee that he was not being melodramatic. The aliens were far too strange and unknowable and the public not ready to know about that paranormal phenomenon. He then added, the committee and all of its subordinate units would become more shrouded in their operations, not less,